Amazing. Thank you both. Oh my God, it's so good to see Abraham. I've known Abraham for over 5 years, by the way, and it's the first time we're meeting in person. Just want to let you guys know that. I want this subject, internal to external, leveraging your firm's capital for economic empowerment. It's kind of like an entrepreneurship session. So many people are in organizations at the moment, and you may have a side hustle, you may not, but there might be things that you want to do for the community, but you don't have your own resources, your own money, but you can use your companies, your firm. So this session is about how to do that essentially and how other people have. So with our two panelists today, please introduce yourselves and let's start off with how you've been able to use your firm or previous firms capital in order to empower the Black community.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tamika Thomas, and I am currently, I am now the COO of the Veritas School of Social Sciences. Very excited to be here with you all.
Congratulations.
And as far as capital, I think one of the key things for us and that I would encourage you all is to think about how you define capital. And so for us, when we think about how we define capital, we really think about our students and we really think about what they're able to bring and what their purpose is going to be and how they're going to make a difference as they move into the world. And so a large part of capital for us comes down to what our students know and are able to do and how they can then leverage that when they actually get out into the world. And so we really focus on teaching them to be business minded. We focus on teaching them strategy. We focus on teaching them debate, which we can talk about a little bit later, and how to actually use that as a leverage. So for us, we define capital a little bit differently, and I would encourage you guys to think about in your respective firms and careers and professions, what is your actual capital?
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Abraham Williamson. I'm a founding attorney at Go With Canvas, and I also am the on-air host for Diverse Tech Founders Media. And when I was thinking about this topic, I thought back to the very first year. I was working at one of these big law firms in New York, and there was a client that came in pro bono in the art space. We're a venture capital and arts-based law firm now, but back at the time, this was an opportunity for me to develop that skill set. And I remember feeling guilty about bringing this client on. The theme of the day has been like courage and being in the room and stepping up. And when we started working for this particular client, I felt guilty because we were spending a lot of resources on it. It ended up being like $100,000 worth of free legal services. And I don't know about you all, but where I came from, that was a lot of money to have somebody give away for free. But then I got recruited for another project and realized that they had spent 10 times that amount, $1 million on another company in a different way. And so when I think about where to start, I think at a baseline level, it's realizing that this is already happening whether you're a part of the game or not. And when you do get that opportunity, which I hope we can talk about more, what to do when those opportunities are presented.
Great. And just on that, so you were able to do it, even though you felt guilty, you kind of went forward without you knowing about the fact that someone else was spending $1 million. What also motivated you to keep spending that resources? And for others in the room, how can they go forward and pitch an idea so that they can also tap into their company's resources?
That is a great question. And it starts inside of you with your purpose. And that's not just a cliche, because that's actually ties to how it was pitched as well. Because I remember walking into the two partners' offices, it was like the lawyer for this particular form of art and then this particular high, profile lawyer. And I walked in there, and the first thing that I told them was, here's this opportunity. They wanted me to meet. Thank you. But here are the 2 reasons why you wouldn't do this. And they were kind of taken aback a little bit. And after I told them the 2 reasons, they were like, oh, well, we don't even care about that. And then as we got into it, that kind of broke the ice. And they were even more invested because I had put the objections on the table up front. And I think all too often we try to avoid that or try to pretend like there's no risk involved in doing it. Everybody sees it and knows it. They just want to know if your character is such that you're going to recommend it and mention it. And I think a big component of that is being able to lean into those objections. I heard this piece of advice right when I was starting, that it's hard to come out. It's hard to agree if you start off disagreeing. So when people like raise objections or they have issues or concerns, instead of dismissing it out hand, to actually lean into it, recognize it, deal with it, And people, because I also used to do like the risk disclosures for some public companies, and like halfway through that time, I realized that it actually made people feel more confident the more risks that you put in there because they were aware of it. But if you try to say, oh, this is risk free, people get skeptical.
It's funny, it kind of reminds me of a business plan when they ask you to put the risk in. And when you don't put in any risk, they're not interested in your business because it feels like you haven't done your research because there's always some sort of risk. So that's a really great point. And then Tamika, just in terms of your students, how do you kind of empower them and instill, the confidence in them to go out and pitch in the world?
Yeah, so first it starts with that. I want to go back to risk because at the start of Veritas, one of the risks that we took was putting students, we take these students who have never debated, have no experience with debate, and we take 10 months and we train them. And they go to Harvard and they compete against students from all around the world. And for 5 consecutive years, these students have won.
Wow.
Thank you. And in order to do that, there's a lot of risk involved, right? We don't have a criteria that says there is some background that you have to come from. We say come as you are, and then we will train you and we will take you and we will develop these skills in you. And so when we think about risk, we encourage our students to take risk because without risk, there is no reward. And that's extremely important. And I want to tell you just very quickly in terms of risk, right? I can think back to talking to my children. I have 2 girls, one who is a junior in college and another who is graduating, actually has graduated and will be a freshman. So let's hear it for the empty nester. Yes. And I can remember being in college and I can remember having an opportunity, 2 opportunities. One was an opportunity to work at Victoria's Secret. And without telling my age, at that time, Victoria's Secret, I see some heads nodding, that's where you wanted to work. And the other opportunity was to work for less money at the school that I was attending. And it was a lot less money. And so what I had to think about was the long-term goal. What did I want in the end? The immediate would have been the discount, which would have been fantastic. But in the long term, there was a bigger picture. And so I had to make that decision and take that risk to say, do I want this now or do I want to take a chance and see what can happen later? Later turned into, of course, I took the job at the school and it turned into working for the president of the university. And so what we teach our students is that if you are not willing to take a risk, you are never going to see how far you could possibly go. And the thing about that is that with risk, you don't get to see what's on the other side. And that's the beauty of the reward on the other side, right? So I really just encourage you guys to take those risks and make sure that even though you can't see what's on the other side, you understand without taking the risk, you'll never actually know.
Thank you. And, when I think about this kind of leveraging your firm's capital for economic empowerment, I think about some of the new accelerator programs that have come out. So like maybe for Black founders or for Black employees or just different things that someone internally has started for the Black community, but then it's pitched by the larger firm. So it could be kind of, AWS Black Founder Fund or something like that. That's quite big. I guess, how can we start small in the organization? What step-by-step guide would you give those here today to kind of start small, get that ROI, and then kind of develop to those bigger programs that make, significant impact?
Okay, so I don't know what everyone's situation is, but the second firm where I was, they gave us like a marketing budget or a business development budget. And to me, that was huge because previously I didn't really have any budget. So I think it starts with what resources have been specifically allocated to you. And even if you don't think that you have them, I would go talk to somebody to see, because just in keeping with the theme, we don't always know what we have access to. And with that budget, I was planning out what to do with it for the year. And someone asked if we would sponsor grants for dadpreneurs for Father's Day. And they were looking for a certain amount. I could put up maybe 10% of it. And then I went to some of the other Black partners in this particular firm and asked them if they would match what I was doing. And together we were able to fully fund this grant for the dadpreneurs for Father's Day. And I think it starts with showing what you can do with the resources that you already have. And when people see you're a good steward of that, I think they will move beyond that. Another thing too, which maybe we could talk about, as we get into these answers, is what you were mentioning, like social capital, redefining And I have come to view it in these like three buckets of, I call them the three I's. The first is invitations. I don't know about any of you, but if you got offered or requested to like join your firm's like diversity brochure or something like that, all of us are just like, oh, why are they asking me? I don't want to be involved in that. But when you say yes and opt into stuff like that, it is a form of social capital that you can leverage elsewhere. So I would encourage everyone, if you have that opportunity, to think about how it can be used. Another one is introductions. When I first got to the second firm, I didn't know a single soul, and the advice that I got was just to talk to people. So when I didn't have any work, I picked up the phone and I called all of the other offices and spoke with those people, and now you have advocates. And then the third is insights. And well, let me ask the room, how many of you at some point before you hit 18 had to move at least once to a new home or a new city or something like that? Show of hands. I did as well. And what that taught me was that isolation can have a negative impact on you. You can't be isolated. And all too often we get into these big companies and we have a bad experience. And instead of, having a team around us, we start shrinking. And I think the more people that you can have on your team, the more you're able to see what's possible to be able to build internally before you go externally.
Wow. And just to jump in on that, so at BYP Network, we work a lot with the Black ERG groups, so the employee resource groups in companies. And those are very powerful groups to be a part of, because they're the ones making change internally and externally as well. They're the ones going out, helping to recruit alongside talent acquisition. And they're also the internal advocates as well. And that's kind of where you learn to kind of get the advocates, get the sponsors, get the mentors, and also you get budget as well. So that's what you can use to help empower the community internally and externally. So that's also something that I'd jump into. And then Tamika?
Yeah, and then I would just add to that, there's something very, very powerful, and this, I'm hearing my mother in my head now, right? About being good stewards of your money, being good stewards of your resources. And that's really, really important. You have to be able to show that you are worth the investment that you want someone to make. That is really, really crucial. So part of what we did when we first started, it was just about debate. That was it. We were this small little debate program, and hopefully we could get these students to Harvard, and hopefully they could do a great job. Well, once they won that first year, guess what happened in terms of sponsorship? You have more people who are going, you know what, I can get behind this. I see the hard work that you're doing. I see where you guys are going. 5 years later, we have several corporate sponsors. But it's only because we had to be willing to first say, we're going to put ourselves out there. We're going to show that we are worth the investment that we are asking you to make. And so now we have gone from just the Veritas Debate Institute to a global travel program where we'll be taking students to Israel in November. We have a corporate immersion program where we will have students in Atlanta at the end of this month going to different corporations at the CEO level and spending the day with corporations to see how it functions. But it really started because we made sure that with everything we did, we operated in excellence. And we made sure that we did things that people wanted to invest in us. So I would really say, just really make sure that whatever your business venture is, that you are first making sure that it's something that when you're asking people to invest, they're going, yes, this is something that I want to get behind. In fact, I'm running to get behind it, is where you want them.
I love that. When I think again about BYP Network, actually, when we got started, it was actually our members that were our advocates internally. So they were the ones that were like, I told this story to one of my employees. Was one of the first checks we got was a member at an organization who gave us $3,000. It was like, I'm going to sponsor this. I'm going to find that money, and I'm going to give it to this company when we first got started. And till now, we love them because that was that initial, funding. Obviously, now we're a 7-figure revenue company, right? But at the time, that mattered. And I think it's about starting small and realizing that year one isn't year 5. And that's the key thing. So I love exactly what you said. And if we look at kind of 2020 and all the pledges that happened with George Floyd, all these companies coming up with the statements, all the money, billions, or at least over $1 billion was kind of given to the Black community or ring fenced. But now we see that didn't happen. Those budgets are being rescinded. How do you hold your firm accountable to some of the actions they put out there or the statements that they put out there when it comes to leveraging their resources for the Black community?
Well, for us, one of the things we focus on as an organization is equity. We are very big on making sure that our students have the same opportunities as everyone else. And so when we think about those people who are our sponsors and what they commit to, they are committing to our mission and vision. And we make sure that in all of our meetings, in all of our wording, in all of our actions, that we are committing to it first. And so I have to say that I think one of the most important things is to make sure that you are staying true to what your vision has been for your company, your corporation, because you can't ask people to stay true to a vision that you have strayed from. And a lot of times what happens is as you grow, right? As you grow, sometimes it changes a little bit for you, right? At the very beginning, there's this passion and there's this drive, and this is really important. And then you start making a little bit of money, then it starts getting a little bigger, and then maybe your goals start to shift. You can't ask your investors and your funders to believe in something that you have changed from what they invested in the beginning. So I always go back to being true to yourself, being true to what you set out to do. And if you are changing and moving in a different direction, that has to be clearly communicated so that everyone who's invested has the opportunity to decide whether or not they still agree with where you are and what the mission and goal of your corporation is.
Thank you. Abraham?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I'm not even going to pretend like that's an easy one to answer. One, I guess you could call it a strategy when you're negotiating with your company, which I think is basically what we're talking about, is to always ask as a threshold matter, what is the policy for this? And to really get a clarity on how does this normally get treated? And are you treating me in the same way? And with respect to the money, that's a little bit different because I don't know people's views on this, but what we're really asking for and what they had kind of pledged was a form of reparations in a lot of ways. And I remember working at a company while this was all happening, and even just having internal discussions within our community, it's like, what does that really mean? That means you're asking people to take a step back and to give you more of a head start than what they have, which I think is uncomfortable for people to get behind, especially when they're looking at you to try to find a model. There's nobody, to my knowledge right now at the company who's just like, oh, we got it figured out. This is how we'll do it. They're really counting on the people in this room. And by the way, I can feel like the success and the adrenaline from Jamie and Kelvin, but I can feel the success in this room. And if everybody in here, when offered the opportunity to hold their feet to the fire, I think you should do that. Now, it's difficult in corporate America. I'm an entrepreneur now, and I see the difference. You do run that risk of alienating people, and everybody's competing to be the most professional, et cetera. But I think when you have that opportunity, people ask you, well, what should we do? You should have an answer.
Thank you. And we have to go to Q&A now. So please do scan the barcodes if you have any questions. So I'll just ask one final question before we go to the Q&A. So we're talking about, again, leveraging your firm's capital resources for economic empowerment. But what if it's you that has the business or has the idea? So the investment will be in you, specifically in your business. How do you pitch that compared to if it was a charity that you have no involvement to?
I'm going to let him go first so I can think.
Okay, that's fair. We've been going back and forth. So, I had someone on the podcast recently, Jonathan Mentor is his name, and he said something that has been sticking with me ever since, which is that a lot of times we really lead with the product. Like, this is the widget we're building. This is how cool it is. It's so different. You've never seen anything like that before. But that doesn't really get people excited, whether it's the customers, your team, or even investors. What people get excited about is your purpose, why you're doing it. And I think if you lead with that as you're pitching, if you have the choice between, well, this person is going to come back after we give them the feedback with a slightly better widget, or this person is committed to this for life, and no matter what we throw at them, they're going to be right back here because their purpose is so strong. I think the purpose is going to win out every time. And so that's what a lot of founders, I think, are realizing now or have been doing. And when they get in front of the right people who believe in that, there's going to be a magic that happens.
Well, yeah, that's good.
I should have went first. I have to agree with purpose. And I think that your purpose makes all of the difference because there are a million products, there are a million companies, corporations. Everybody is selling something, but when you bring your whole self to whatever it is, that makes the difference, right? So for me, I grew up in New York, where I know you guys were just
just
back.
last week.
Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And I grew up not seeing people who were like me. And what I mean by that is that I grew up in poverty, and I grew up around a lot of violence, a lot of gun violence, a lot of drugs. I grew up during the crack epidemic. I don't know how many of you remember that. And the people who I didn't see were the people who wanted to go to school, who had a parent. My mom was a single mom with 5 children on public assistance, but she made sure that education was important, even if she didn't know exactly how to do it, right? And what I didn't see were the people who wanted to get out. And what I didn't see were the people who said there has to be something different and better. I don't know what it is, but I know there is something that is different and better. I didn't see those people. And when I went to school, the people who I were in school with were either super, super nerdy, shout out to the nerds, right? Or they were not. And I was somewhere in the middle, but I didn't see me. And I certainly didn't see Tamika on the TV, in the books, right? Reading Rainbow. Tamika was, this was earlier. Okay, I'm a 70s baby. Okay. And so I didn't see any of those things. And so I spent some years in education, which was my calling. We don't have enough time for me to tell you the story of how I got in. By the way, I was going to be a lawyer, corporate to be exact, travel around the world, have no kids, be extremely successful. I was going to be the world's greatest auntie, by the way, let my sister have all the children and do all of that stuff. My sister is unmarried. She has no children. I have 2, and I've been married 20 years. So we'll see how that worked out. And shout out to that, right? And when I became affiliated with Veritas, what was important about that was that I saw kids who were like me. I saw kids who had the intellect, but they didn't have the opportunity. I saw kids who people saw their color before they saw anything else, and were not willing to give them the same opportunities. I saw kids who were brilliant, but had no idea how to channel that and how to work through some of the other emotions and feelings that they had. And so when I started volunteering with Veritas, I volunteered, and I met the founder and CEO, Brandon Fleming. What he saw was my why. And my why kept me working for free for probably longer than I should have. And my why kept us connected. So when you are thinking about yourself, I do agree your purpose is important. Your why is important. Because when you do things that aren't quite right, when you mess up, as we all do as small business owners, when something doesn't go right, and when you are having to come to people and say, hey, you know what, this went a little bit left. When people understand your why and your purpose, they are more willing to follow you, support you, and fund you all the way till the end.
Thank you. Amen. Wow. I believe we only have a few minutes of Q&A. My apologies.
It's okay. You're the CEO, so we operate on your time, okay? All right, so a couple questions. One question for you, Ms. Tamika. Are you accepting any volunteers to go on the Israel trip?
Israel trip.
Questions that need answers, okay?
And unfortunately, not at this time. We are not accepting any volunteers. We have a partnership with the Schusterman Foundation, which is one of the largest Jewish organizations in ITREC, and they are actually sponsoring, fully funding the entire trip for our scholars. So
That's good. Okay. What advice do you have for ERG leaders who are challenged with the risk of leading without funding? So maybe we end on that one so you guys can, yeah.
I let him go first the last time, and then he.
That's a really good question. And in fact, I think the second firm where I was, our Black Lawyers Affinity Group didn't have any funding. And we were still meeting and talking about what we wanted to do. And we wanted to go on a retreat. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to pay for it. And I was like, we should ask for it as much as we can get. And there were different views on that. And so we made 2 budgets. We made all inclusive, everybody can go budget. And then we made this is the bare minimum budget. And we submitted the full one at first, and we got all of the funding. And I think just asking for it with like a good proposal, not to say that there are bad proposals, but you know what I mean? Like to actually put forth a solid plan that says, this is going to actually bring us together. We keep losing a lot of Black folks, and you can't have retreats all the time, but here we're actually going to talk about institutional knowledge and tricks of the trade, and they're going to meet people that they haven't met in person yet. I think if you can make that business case and just make the ask, you put yourself in a better spot, because to have no funding is tough to do anything with no money.
Yeah, and I can jump in on that because, like I said, we support ERGs quite a lot. Part of it as well is it's kind of, as you mentioned, right, putting that proposal forward and getting a sponsor. That's what I've seen has worked well. So the sponsor tends not to look like you. It will be someone very senior on the executive team who is now the advocate of that ERG lead and of that ERG team in general. So they're the ones that will be coming. They'll be the ones kind of signing off on stuff. And when they're in their room, they're the ones saying, hey, we should invest in this ERG group. And I always say that as a ERG leader, it shouldn't be done for free. And what I mean by that is it should either go towards your kind of performance reviews at the end of the year, or you should be given some kind of money personally for the amount of work that's done. A lot of ERGs make the companies look good. That's the key. It's the ERGs that are here in the room, that are there on the tables exhibiting, that's talking about the organization. So the organization needs to back that. So if there's a lack of funding, then you need to put that forward, that why? Why is that the case? You know, we looking on the website, we've made these kind of statements about getting more Black talent. We're here to help that. We need more budget. So I don't believe you should do anything for free. And I believe that, you know, within the ERGs, you need to advocate for yourselves because you're making the companies look good. So we'll end on that note. Thank you both so much. And thank you all so much for your time.